Hello and welcome again to Secrets of Meaning, the podcast TV arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. I'm your host, Rabbi Richard Address. Thank you very, very much for joining us. We invite you to visit the website, jewishsacredaging.com, the Facebook page. And if you have a question about or a comment or a suggestion about the podcast, please feel free to email me at rabbiaddress@jewishsacredaging.com. One of the interesting new life cycle events that take place with our generation in increasing frequency is the aspect of downsizing. You know, that big 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 bedroom house that you may have bought many years ago. Well, you may not need it anymore, and the challenges of where, how, and why. So to explore that, we want to welcome back an old friend of Jewish Sacred Aging and Seekers of Meaning, Dr. David Bernstein, the gerontologist, coming to us from the west coast of Florida, if I'm not mistaken. And we're going to talk about his brand new book called When It's Time to Move, Assessing the Why, Exploring the How. When it's time to move. And we get this question quite a lot in the workshops that we do and the consults that we do with people and families. So it's really, really good to welcome back Dr. Bernstein. Hi, nice to see you again.
Richard, it's a pleasure to see you. Thanks for the invitation.
Oh, no, this is really chock full of stuff. Let's get to the real nitty-gritty stuff. This book, recently published, yes, right, recently out.
Yes, February.
Hardback, and where can I get it?
It's on Amazon. People can write directly to me at my website, powerof5life.com, and that's another place, but it's really faster to get it on Amazon.
Yes, because they can get it. If you order at 9, it's there by 10.
Except if the author orders it and sends it to you, it's 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's right. It's just amazing, anyway, it's another story for another time. In the beginning of this book, you have this little line here that I think is a great, sort of like one of those things you could needlepoint and put on the pillow. Failing to plan is planning to fail. How does that relate to this whole idea of when it's time to move?
Well, it fits perfectly. Although it is an expression that I used a lot in my practice of taking care of older adults who didn't plan for much of anything. Having an absence of a plan takes a typical event into a medical emergency. And that's why, as a doctor, this was so front and center in my life, because I had patients who had no plan about what would happen if one broke their hip and the other was debilitated or disabled, and that there was no plan. And there were all kinds of scenarios that came up. We'll talk about it maybe, a man moved from Chicago to Florida, and there was no plan. He had no plan. They just moved, and he hated it here. He said it was the worst decision he ever made in his life. So having a plan and having to know what you're going to do when you get there, or having a plan to move to a retirement community when you're 55 rather than when you're 85 and you can't move your boxes and you can't do anything in physically, and you can't even make your own decision. Somebody's got to make it for you. That's a horrible plan. And so I experienced that as a physician.
You write in the book, this is also personal, right? This is not
it's very personal.
Yeah.
My wife and I lived on the water with a beautiful view of Tampa Bay for 35 years. We got sunsets every day. We saw dolphins. We saw manatees. A bald eagle would come by. It was hard to leave that place. There were also 17 steps to walk up every time we came in the house, which some days was 2 times. On a Costco day, I would schlep 5 bundles of groceries up 17 steps. And notice I counted, because, you get to that 16th step and you don't want to fall, and you count that one. So it was personal in that regard, but also living on the water and being subject to hurricanes and the worry associated with that just became more than we could bear. And in the summer of 2024, my wife and I decided to spend the summer up in Wisconsin for a month, and we sealed up the house. And my wife does the inside stuff. I'm the outside guy, and I procured 30, 50-pound sandbags, and 10 at a time I got from the sanitation department, and I put them in the trunk of my car, and then I took them out of the trunk of my car, carried them to the backyard on a hand truck, and put them in place. 30, 50-pound bags. We left 2 days later. I got in the car, and I said to my wife, my elbows are killing me. What did I do? I didn't play golf. I didn't do anything. About 100 miles into the trip, it dawned on me, 30-pound, 30, 50-pound bags. And I had tennis elbow for the next week from doing that. And that started our 62-day trip, and 60 of those days talking about whether we should move or not, where we would move, why we would move, and the necessity to do that. It wasn't just a whisper because we were clobbered with Hurricane Helene.
Right.
2 weeks after we returned home. And that was the worst of the storms we'd experienced. We live in a stilt home, so our upper portion of our house was pristine, but the lower part was significantly damaged. And there was a lot of cleanup work to be done. We were really fortunate. We had a contractor, we had a dry out guy, we had a pool company, and all those things were fixed. And at that point, we had decided we were going to move. So we put our house up for sale. We were fortunate to get a buyer really quickly, and we moved. But for 62 of those 62 days, we talked about where we would move, why we would move. And our way home from, we were in Wisconsin, but we got to Cleveland, Ohio. We visited friends. And along the way, I looked in the corner of my eye, like, he's got a really nice garden, but he's got steps up to his office. He's in this community, but he's performing services for all these people. Who's going to take care of him? We got to another place, and they said, that's a really nice house, but you're really pretty isolated. Your kids aren't around. And we visited my brother on Long Island and said, this is nice, but that's not our cup of tea. And we visited really great friends in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. What a great community. They were prisoners to their children and their grandchildren. And so we were able to come to a decision about the kind of lifestyle we wanted when we finally moved.
You mentioned all these things, and all these things go into the plan. You just don't wake up one day and say, okay, we're going to move, although maybe some people do. But the importance of that plan, this is why I love that phrase. So many things go into the idea of that move from the big family house into the next, wherever the next thing is. Talk to me about the necessity of having that, not only the plan of what kind of place we like to move, but the financial aspect of it, because in this day and age, that seems to be a real challenge. So do you consult, do you go to the the financial planner, the elder care attorney, all of the above? Do all these go into the making of the plan?
Great point. And as a physician and having good fortune, we were financially stable enough to make almost any decision we wanted. And that's a really important point, because I had patients that they had enough money to take care of one, but not both of them. They were dependent upon Social Security and little pensions that they had. But if one needed to be in a retirement community or assisted living or a nursing home, there were no funds for the other person to survive. So that was absence of a plan. But we work with a financial planner. We worked with our elder care attorney to put together a trust. So we had all our ducks lined up, and we knew what we could afford. And that was handy for us, and it's handy for anybody, because you never know what other funds are available to support you as an older adult that the community has to offer. And you never know how much you'll need help from neighbors, friends, and family to put a good plan together, because it's not just, I'm going to move to that community over there. It's a matter of how you're going to consolidate, how you're going to declutter, how are you going to part from your friends. It goes with it. It was a big part for us about staying within a reasonable distance of our community and friends and synagogue, because we felt that was the most important contributor to how we're going to live a healthy, long life, is to have those relationships. And to just pack up and move to Minneapolis or Chicago or LA, where we have children, would deprive us of our community. But I've had families that just pick their loved one up and move them to another city. And, I can't imagine being in Minneapolis in the wintertime and being stuck in a building.
Right. Absolutely. One of the things you write about, and as a doctor, I think, obviously it may come as second nature, and this is really crucial in this day and age, given everything, and is when you move and relocate, making sure as part of that plan, access to healthcare. And, maybe I have to get a new physician. Talk to me about how important, though, that part of the plan is. Because not everybody can take everything with them, right?
It's a huge, huge, huge question. I'm still in the same community. I haven't moved, but I can see from my friends who also haven't moved that access to care, even in your own community, is difficult. Finding a physician, or when a physician retires, my friends have said, I have to wait 8 months to get to another doctor.
Yes.
Or I really don't like what this guy's prescribed. I want someone else. And it's that same 8 months, and they're stuck in in limbo. And make it worse when you move from here to Tennessee, as one of my former patients is doing. It's like they have to line up everybody. And it never occurred to me, well, it did. I was a geriatrician. I love taking care of all of their problems. But in this day and age, it's like, well, we found a cardiologist, a neurologist, a geriatric doctor, and a podiatrist because he has diabetes, and an endocrinologist. That's a heavy load. And those are hard doctors to coordinate and get appointments with. And so another aspect of failing to plan is planning to fail, is setting up those appointments before the transition and the move to a different community. It's incredibly important. And considerations for how close is grocery store, because we don't drive very far, and how close is it to a senior center where we can get recreation and community activities. All those things fit into that, in addition to the medical model.
So here's something that has come up a lot, and I'm interested to see whether it came up in your transition as well. And that is your downside. You're downsizing, you have all this stuff. You ask your kids, okay, here, we're moving here. Here's the china. Here's your grandmother's this and the antique that, and take what you want. And the answer is, we don't want any of it.
We don't want any of it. It's exactly those words.
Yes, I know. I know. That's what my daughter said to me. Walk me through what's the psychological impact of saying, and not to take it I did have somebody recently say, well, I took it personally. It was like a rejection of me.
I'm still working on it, Richard.
Okay.
I don't take it personally.
Right.
It's just outside the generational norm that you and I grew up. And their generation is minimalist. It's a generation of experiences, not heirlooms. And so I became a regular visitor to the hospice resale store, which is close to where I work out. So on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'd have my car loaded up with stuff, and I would bring it there. And I was friendly, and I knew the manager of the store. So I'd give her a big hug, and I dropped some stuff off, and they were very, very grateful to have it. And it was great for them. We still haven't gotten rid of everything a year after our move. I have pictures that I've taken out of frames. My family didn't even want picture frames. It's a perfectly good picture frame, but they don't have many pictures up in their homes. It was useless. I've taken pictures out of picture frames. I took a lot of photos when I traveled. Those are in folders or in internet folders or up on Google Photos. And I will tell you the two things that are very difficult for me personally is I collected medical antiques. So I had lots of bottles that I asked antique stores if they would take, and they say, nobody's buying them anymore. When I grew up, my best friend Wayne's father collected mustache mugs. So I thought, I'll collect mustache mugs. Now, he had a pretty big collection that he displayed in his family room. I have maybe 20. I'm going to have to throw them in the bottom of a planter for drainage, because nobody wants them. And some of them are fine china pieces. And it's like, I can't do that yet.
It's
hard.
amazing. It's just, My issue is, if you could look behind, I mean, all the books. I mean, no one wants a lot of these books. I mean, but many of my colleagues who are facing some of this transition, the first thing they say is, what do I do with all these books? I have thousands of books. What do I do with all these books? So it's just a fascinating in the downsizing, decluttering industry. Are there people who you can call and say, come into my house, take a look, do this for me?
Great question. And I had a field trip with my wife down to St. Pete one day, and we went to a art exhibit. And then she said, I want to get a piece of china to fit into my set. I need a gold rounded side thing. And she said, there's that store. And we went into that store. And for me, it was something I could write about and talk to you about. So she was looking for a plate, and I walked around the store and I saw different people trying to buy their things. And at the end, I was up front and I said, where'd you get all this stuff from? He said, well, we had estate sales, and people would just say, here, take everything. And they had this huge warehouse of plates and cups and sets. And then they said they were closing down because nobody was buying this stuff anymore. And they had nothing to do with it. They were giving it away if someone would take it in North Carolina, that there was no use for it. And it was eye-opening. And so it's something our generation, older adults, have to recognize, not only about that, but other generational differences in how we grew up, and helicopter parents versus you and I didn't have a helicopter parent who watched us play ball at 5:30 and 6 o'clock and then expected us to come home on our bicycle. Those parents nowadays are out there watching their kids practice and don't give them the space to grow like you and I did. That's off the subject of moving, but it does fit into the generational gap between us.
I want to ask you, not only from the experience and the book, again, when it's time to move, assessing the why, exploring the how, paperback, available from the usual sources where you get your books. This issue of letting go, from not only the physical aspect, I'm letting this go, but you write about this, and we see this a lot in some of the works, the psycho-spiritual aspect of letting go and what this means. We lived in this house for 30 years. We raised our children. We sat Shiva here. We celebrated weddings here. But now it's time what does this mean for me? How do I let go? And how do I hold on to something that may not be tangible?
Sometimes I'll say that fits more in with what you do than what I do, but I can tell you experiences as a physician and the personal ones is just kind of looking in the mirror and say, I have to move. It's for my health. It's for my longevity. It's so that I can have a healthier existence. And I am intellectually doing this for me and for my own good. And then it takes an intentionality. It's like, I have to do this. I know it's hard, but I must do this. And I'm going to modify it enough so that I'm going to have friends where I move to. I'm going to be in a community, or I'm going to have my family and my grandkids that I didn't have to have an opportunity to see, and make those trade-offs. But like that man who moved from Chicago, this was never a good move for him. But make it a good move. Be intentional about it. And maybe I'm departing from what you asked, but you don't want to be forced into a decision you have no control over, such as we left those steps. We decided to live in that house. Then both of us broke our hips and we couldn't get up the steps, and we'll never get back in that house. And my family's putting me in a nursing home because I didn't make the decision, and that I could have made it earlier. And even for David and Melissa Bernstein, who moved around 70, I'm going to say 55 is probably a good time to start thinking about that. If you're entrenched in your job and it's a really great job, you can still stay there, but move to something smaller, because it gets really hard to schlep a bunch of boxes and downsize and do all those things. And the house it's just a house. And then you become less entrenched in it and make it even more difficult to move later on in life when there's even a greater emotional attachment.
Right. And you don't want to be put, as you assume, like you just alluded to with the broken hips, you don't want to be forced into a situation where you have no choice and it's totally out of your control.
And as a physician, I saw that. And as a physician, I dreaded it because it would take my office and make it chaos with the number of phone calls back and forth because someone's out of town and someone's in the hospital with a broken hip and there's someone with dementia that's staying home alone. And it's like, I know it sounds improper, but it was like, why me? Why does all this have to be in my office, David Bernstein's office today when I'm really busy. I got all these people to see and I'm going to have all these calls because I advised those people to move a year ago.
Right. So you may have, well, I'm going to bet you may have run into this once or twice in your career. People get to a certain age and the one of the spouses says, it's really time. We have to really sit down and talk about this. And the other spouse says, no, I don't want to. I love this place. This is my happy place. I can't do this. Have you ever, I would imagine that this scenario has played out in your practice.
Sure. I think it even played out with my parents. My parents' age difference was, I don't remember, we'll say 10-year age difference. And they moved to a independent living facility where they could age and remain there and meals were served and they could drive for lunches and dinners and go out. There were lots of interesting things about just their case alone. They moved 6 miles up the road in South Florida. And none of their friends ever came to visit, as far as I know. And my mother was considered the kid. And she wasn't a youngster, but she was like the kid. My dad was the older one, and he was sort of the slower of the two in terms of activities and doing things. And they struggled, I think, to make a decision. Others, it came down to, I'm just not going. Or even worse were people in a second marriage. And the property was promised to one person, their son, and it left the second wife out of the picture. And I could see that he was going to die before her and she was going to be homeless. So that was really unpleasant for Dr. Bernstein. And I'm sure it was unpleasant for everybody in their family who knew something had to be done and nobody was taking the reins and doing it, and nor was it ever done properly.
Hence that phrase that, from the beginning, failing to plan is planning to fail. You write about something about children. Okay. We're going to be down. We're going to relocate. We have children here, there, and how do we factor in where different children live? Because so many of our children live far away from us. And you alluded to that earlier in your own family. What takes precedence? Being close to the children and grandchildren, or being able to go health-wise, visit, but still have your own comfort level, your community, your friends, etc.?
I never thought about it too much before our situation, but I did recognize that many of my older adults were running away from their children and didn't want their children to know what their life and lifestyle were like down here in Florida. It's not the villages where people were crazy, even, doing all kinds of things. But they wanted their privacy and they wanted the life the way they had it. And some of them were hiding the little bit of dementia that they had and that they weren't getting along very well or whatever those things were. But they didn't want anybody intervening and meddling in their lives. And others were pretty content moving to far out of our range to be closer to family. But I'll get back to a point you were raising there that I think is worthwhile, is to have, and I'm putting in quotes, family meetings. And my wife and I started doing that with our kids a few years back when we would go away for the summers and we'd all be together. And I said, okay, time for a family meeting. I'm going to tell you about what's in our trust and what's in our will and what our last wishes are. And we did that. And I had, among other things, everybody in the room at the same time. three of our four families were there, and the fourth one was there by Zoom. And it's really important because I wanted everybody to hear the same thing at the same time. I didn't want to try and explain it in four different meetings with my family members so that I said something different another time. I wanted everybody to say, that's what David said. And so we did that with that. And then I expanded it and we talked about our health, and there were ample opportunities for us to talk about that we were very content in our home. Up until the time of the hurricane, though, I understand that our kids were rumbling about whether this was still good for us to stay in this home. But they love the home, and they love the fact that they could come and visit and have their summer and a winter visit in Florida and see the water and see the sunsets and be in their hometown. So they didn't influence and try to influence us in any way. And in retrospect, they said, well, maybe we should have, because those hurricanes were getting kind of difficult.
One of the great challenges in downsizing and this transition to the next stage of life is where. So in your practice, in your consulting, and when people will come into your office and say, so I don't know whether it should be a continuing care retirement community that can just flow through, or assisted living. We don't need skilled nursing yet. Maybe we just got back a smaller condominium and then worry about the next stage when the next stage happens. How do we begin to approach where to go?
I think it's very personal. It's very much the state of your health. It's very much the state of what your expectations are in terms of how long you're going to live. I think continuing care retirement communities are really a great idea. I think they offer a lot of promise, but they're kind of on the expensive side.
Yes.
I also think that their planning is askew, because I think the longer people live, the greater likelihood that they're going to have dementia. So I think those communities will have a lot of dementia care patients and not as much room to handle them. I know of one facility that's not struggling, but I've spoken to different groups there, and it's like, and I had patients who live there. It's like, they don't have the space to take care of that many people. All these people are going to live to be 85. A third of them are going to have dementia. And there's not enough physical space for all of those people. But continuing care retirement is one, and places that aren't continuous care but have a independent and assisted living facilities, but maybe not a dementia specific unit, are good places to go. Like my parents, who moved into a facility down in South Florida, and there are many of those and more cropping up. There is a real estate problem because they're so expensive to build now that there are not going to be as many. Home ownership is a challenge there too. But I think people should start the discussion early and have a plan. We talk about plan a lot.
Plan.
And talk to your children or talk to your loved ones, and the loved ones may say, no, stay where you are. We'll just come down and visit you, and we'll make sure that we make your place as age-in place possible. So we're going to make sure there's grab bars. We're going to make sure there's a limited number of steps in your home, or put in a ramp in case you need it for a walker or a wheelchair. But make those adjustments to your environment so that you can stay there. Don't kind of age in place, but not take care of your place, because then that's a problem. And then there's the issue of hoarding and people just not being able to dispose of things. And then it becomes a health hazard. It's a problem. So everybody's got to be involved. And the doctor, I'd love to be part of it, but I couldn't always see all of it. And patients are really good about hiding it from their family and their doctor.
And also the part of the challenge right now economically is there's a tremendous disparity in economics, especially as we get older. And so a lot of these places that are really lovely and full service, a lot of people, as they get old, they just can't afford. They literally can't afford the monthly fee, the buy-in fee. And that's a real crisis, which I don't see society handling unless I'm mistaken. But it's going to impact more and more and more people because we're all getting older. That's something that I don't know. The economics of aging, as we call it in Jewish Sacred Age, it's a real challenge right now, a real challenge.
It's a horrendous challenge. Really, my next door neighbor is 40 years old, and he works for a real estate company that builds corporate development and private homes, not private homes, but communities. And he's the one that educated me about the cost of building these facilities because it's so expensive to build and therefore they're expensive to live in and people can't afford them. And there's not enough rehabilitatable space in this country to do that. And you're talking to me after I've been in Europe a couple of times and just we're in the Far East where there's more universal health care and universal care for elders. In Asia, there's a remarkable thing. As life expectancies goes up, the number of children people have are going down. So there's this demographic thing.
Likewise here, same thing in the United States.
But a little bit worse and really, really bad in Japan. Japan's done some things like getting older adults back in the workforce just to give them something to do. And they may be light guards or a guard in front of a parking lot just to make sure that people are safe coming out of the parking lot. But give people a purpose in life and give people a job and get a little extra money in their pocket because their life expectancies are so long that there's a cost involved to the government and the government supporting a lot of that. We don't have that here.
No, we do not.
So there's no support. It's like I have no lifeline to help me when I get there. And there is an expectation among individuals who grew up through the Depression and in the early part of baby boom that we're expecting to have a lifeline and they have not. And that's kind of what you're getting to.
And I don't see a societal emphasis on trying to deal with this issue. It's sort of like either ignored, the can is kicked down the road, but the reality is it's a lot of moms and dads and sisters and brothers who are facing this with very little financial resources to back them up. Not everybody has that pension or booming 401k or whatever it's called.
That's correct. And we didn't even talk about the sandwich generation who were in the midst of having to deal with that. I mean, I always think of my generation of my peeps and my adult population, but I know there's a generation, my kids who have my grandkids who are in their 6 and 7 and 10, and they're going to get older and they're going to have us to contend with.
No, I've had this conversation with the people in my kids' generation who are in their 40s, and said, you have no idea what it may cost you to take care of me. And it's just, and they're squeezed themselves in many cases of trying to make it from day to day. It's a very interesting, the whole economics. And because people think of it as economics of aging as just physically old people, but it really is, as you know, a family systems issue. It's a family systems issue that we still very much ignore. Before we, once again, when it's time to move, assessing the why, exploring the how, the website, David, is what? Power of
the number 5, life.com. And I encourage people to visit us, read my blog, sign up for my newsletter. We have some free mess recipes that come out for seasonal things like salads for summer and holiday recipes my wife has produced, and she's written her books too. We're really proud of the work we do. And we love to communicate it with as many people as possible.
In the book too, I also want to mention in the appendix of when it's time to move, there's a series of checklists that sort of like can summarize, if I'm saying this right, summarize the body of the book, but in a checklist form so as you can go through that. You've also written, I think in one of your newsletters, in the Power of 5 newsletters, the impact of stress. This downsizing and the move can be, I'm going to take a shot in the dark, very stressful. Not on a whole variety of levels, not the least of which is the psychospiritual level. How do you begin to handle the stress of what for some people they may understand may be the last move that they'll ever have to make? Where does the stress play into this?
It's huge. It needs to be understood. There's limited number of places to turn, because if I called this a medical problem, moving, you can call it, from your perspective, the spiritual problem of moving, but there aren't as many doctors out there who have time to listen to the discussion about that. I mean, you just asked me about for Viagra, and now my appointment's over, and we're 5 minutes from, and now you're telling me you're going to move? The doctors don't have the time for that. And in the counseling sessions that a rabbi would go through, I mean, that becomes an additional stressful thing. That's really hard to find. And that I will say there are geriatric case managers who can help coordinate that. Is there a cost to that? Yes. Is it worthwhile? I think so. Somewhere in my writing, and I pulled it out today for you also, is there's some information I have in my book about the National Association of Productivity and Organizational Professionals who help with organization and management of the move, and National Association of Senior and Specialty Move Managers that can also help organize the move. So if you're an out-of-town family, you'll know that there's someone who will come in and organize the moves, and those can be really helpful. And leaving some of the stress, but it is stressful, and it becomes a medical issue, and the failing to plan is planning to fail, and having that is a very stressful thing when it comes up abruptly.
That's why I love that phrase. And if you live in and around a city with a competent or a major Jewish family and children's service, that is also a very, very good resource to access a list of geriatric care managers, hospitals, et cetera, et cetera. Dr. David Bernstein, thank you very, very much once again for sharing your wisdom. Welcome back from your trip. Continued success and stay healthy. And
thank you.
Hi to your
great seeing you. Thank you.
Hi to your wife as well. Great recipes. And again, when it's time to move, assessing the why, exploring the how, bookstores, Amazon, where you get your books. Check it out. Doctor, thank you. Stay healthy. Talk to you soon, I hope. Take care. To all of you, thank you very much for joining us on today's edition of Seekers of Meaning, the podcast TV arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. Again, visit us at our website, jewishsacredaging.com. You'll find a conveniently located donate button. And if you just click on that and follow the prompts, we very much appreciate your support. If you'd like to become a sponsor of some of these podcasts to get your word out around the world, please just email me at rabbiaddress@jewishsacredaging.com. We'll take it from there. Seekers of Meaning is produced at the broadcast centers of Lubetkin Media in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And a huge shout out to our tech guru and genius, Steve Lubetkin. To all of you, thank you again for joining us. Until we see each other again, be safe, stay healthy, and most of all, be kind to one another. Todah and Shalom.